Video we will try to understand what is key management and what are the digital certificates and what's there in our cryptographic system which makes secure communication possible. Firstly, let's see where do we stand here. So we are at the beginning of module 3. In the previous modules we have seen the basics of cryptography in module 1, and in module 2 we have seen RSA, we have seen cryptographic hash, we have seen Diffie-Hellman key exchange, and so on. So that's all about how do we encrypt our message, encryption, decryption. And now this module, the first half of this module will deal with how do we say a person is authenticated to send a message. If they are using the keys, how exactly those keys are generated, who generates that key, and how those keys are stored. So all about management of those particular keys. So now let's jump to the presentation. So my dear friends, intentionally I'll be using complete sentences in this presentation, even though in the presentation we say that only the pointers are supposed to be used, but as you know, in this difficult conditions where we are doing this online teaching, see, I'm not presenting a particular small topic here, I'm trying to teach you the entire concept. So I would like to stick on to some complete sentences here. Okay, so introduction. So what is this key management? So this is management of cryptographic keys, my dear friends. So what do we mean by cryptographic keys? What are the different kinds of keys do we use? Based upon the kind of encryption, these keys can be your private keys or your public keys. Okay, and then this key management deals with generation, exchange, storage, use, and so many other things with this particular keys. So if you are generating keys, so there should be some mathematical basis or mathematical foundation behind the generation of these keys. So when we exchange, so in the last module we have seen a particular technique called as Diffie-Hellman key exchange, where it was clearly stated how the keys were exchanged based upon the co-prime factors and other mathematics. And then storage. So where exactly is this stored? So there should be some central repository where all the public keys are stored. Okay, and then using, so suppose we generate the key, so how long these keys are available. Destruction, so what is the timestamp associated with this particular key, so when it is to be destructed, so the next pair of keys can be generated. So that is about the replacement of the keys. So coming to the cryptographic protocol, so whenever we generate keys, so we don't just randomly generate keys, so we follow particular protocol in cryptography to do that. And even to store, there are some key servers who are going to take care of generation and the storage of our keys, and then user procedures. So if two parties need those keys, then what is the protocol to be followed to exchange those keys? So it all deals with user procedures. And then it concerns key at the user level, either between the users or the systems. So need not every time two people or two human beings are trying to communicate. Maybe the two systems are trying to communicate. So at every level, both at the user level and at the systems level, our key exchange should work. So now coming to type of keys. So the type of keys include symmetric and asymmetric keys. So when we since this is the third module, so we all are aware about what exactly are symmetric keys. So symmetric key encryption, where both in the encryption and decryption same set of keys or same key is used. So when we say same key is used, so how these keys are generated, who are going to share them, what is the procedure being followed? So all these things comes under key management. When same keys are used for encryption and decryption, that becomes a symmetric key algorithm. Coming to asymmetric keys, as we know that we encrypt using public keys and we decrypt using the user's private key. And these keys, even though the different keys are used for encryption and decryption, their mathematical basis keeps them intact, and that's the basis of generating two different keys even for encryption and decryption. Coming to public key infrastructure, the implementation of public key cryptography requires an organization. Yes, we were talking about the public key infrastructure. It's the implementation of public key cryptography requires an organization to establish an infrastructure to create and manage public and private key pairs along with digital certificate. So public key infrastructure basically deals with everything we have seen so far regarding the key management. That is, who's going to create it, who's going to manage it, how long is he going to store that. All these kinds of information comes under the concept of public key infrastructure. So let's move on with the next one. See, this key management consists of 3 steps. That is, how we are going to exchange it between 2 parties, how we are going to store it, where exactly we are going to store it, how the 2 communicating parties are going to take it from the storage unit, and then how far we are going to use it. So what may be the timestamp, or how frequently we can use it, or how frequently we can change it. All these things shall come under key usage. Coming to the key exchange. Key exchange deals with the setting the details of the cryptography. It may require exchanging identical keys or possessing the other party's public key, just like Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. So now, when we talk about key exchange, that means we have already surpassed the stage of key generation. So based upon some mathematical foundation, suppose even if the keys are generated, now this key exchange step deals with how exactly the Alice or the party A is going to acquire the public key of the Bob, even though the public key is known to everybody, but still the communicating parties need to have that public key. So how we are going to exchange that? That is also a very important concept here. And then exchanging the identical keys under the category of symmetrical encryption, that also comes under key exchange. So all these kinds of exchanging the keys comes under key exchange, and as we have seen in the module 2, one prominent step to or technique to exchange these kinds of keys was Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Coming to key storage. So the storage of these keys must be stored securely to maintain communication security. Even to store these keys, an encryption application can manage the keys for the user and depends on the access password to control use of this key. So as we know that the entire encryption technique stands on a single leg on how exactly the keys are managed. If the middleman or the hacker or eavesdropper, whatever you want to call them, if that guy gets this key when these keys are not securely stored, when we say these are not securely stored, it means that even to store these keys, so we know that why are we using this key? We are using this key to make our communication secure. But even to store these keys, we can have some encryption algorithm, or we can have some strong setup to secure these communications. So, and then coming to an encryption application message manages. So this is an encryption application. So there is an application which manages. Suppose if Bob is trying to communicate, then how he or she is going to get the public key of Alice. So all these things shall deal with the key storage. Coming to key usage. So the major issue is the length of time a key is to be used. For example, as we know, even in today's scenario, frequently our internet banking user IDs passwords are prompted to change very frequently, maybe once in a 6 month or once in a year. Even it is a very safe procedure to change our mail IDs, user IDs, passwords. So very similarly, even the keys which are used for encryption and decryption should be changed regularly. So now when we say regularly, what is the frequency of changing? How far we are going to use a pair of keys? That will depend upon how complex the application is going to be and what kind of subscription we have with the key certifying authority. And then frequency of replacement. So frequency of replacement may change. Suppose in the beginning of the communication, if the communication was supposed to be not so very private, then the frequency of keys may be very long. And as and when the application needs some very confidential data to be exchanged, then the frequency of replacement should be increased. That may be approximately once in 3 months or once in 4 months. The symmetric key should change with each message or interaction. So when we say symmetric key, so we are talking about same keys even at the encryption and decryption end. Since symmetric keys, we cannot keep symmetric keys same for each and every different sessions of communication, because once this symmetric key gets leaked, or if the middleman tries to hack this particular symmetric key, then every further communication can be jeopardized. So it's a very safe practice to frequently change the symmetric key. So then what are the challenges in key management? So as we have seen so far, we have talked about storing, exchanging, using, generation of the keys. Now we shall list the different challenges in key management. The first one is scalability. So scalability deals with a large number of encryption keys. So when we say large number of encryption keys, it also talks about how long an encryption key has to be. So if two parties are trying to communicate, and if I'm talking about symmetric encryption, if two parties try to communicate 10 times in a day, then the key management should deal with 10 different sets of keys to be exchanged between these two parties in a day. Similarly, what if this goes on for 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, and a year? So the number of keys becomes very large. So the key management should deal with the scalable issue. Coming to the security, vulnerability of keys from outside hackers and malicious insiders. Vulnerability means how prone is this key to the outside attack. Suppose for a hacker or eavesdropper tries to get this particular key, what kind of security does this certifying authority or this centralized server where we are from where we are trying to access these keys is strong? So that's also an important issue to be dealt with. Availability, ensuring data accessibility for authorized users. So when we talk about authorized users, to check the authentication of a particular party, we ask him to enter the user ID and password. Similarly, on successful authentication of the user ID and password, our server should be online every time a user tries to log in. So this set of keys which are to be distributed to the two parties, so those must be accessible whenever a user logs in. So that deals with availability. Coming to the heterogeneity, so it supports multiple kinds of databases, applications, and standards. Even though the database management system is being evolving since decades, there may be legacy systems which are still in practice. Suppose in this time, even we have seen in the newspapers that there are many systems which run on COBOL, when the computer science has evolved so very much. So the heterogeneity challenge in key management deals with supporting the key management with multiple databases or multiple versions of same databases. Coming to the governance, defining policy driven access control and protection for data. So suppose even if I am trying to, even the certifying authority or the central server is trying to distribute the keys, even for the distribution, that communication needs to be governed by some suitable protocols. So the governance includes compliance with data protection environments. There may be some digital rights management applied at different parties. So the governance is also a key challenge in the key management in cryptography. Coming to digital certificates. Digital certificate is one very important technique where the communication which is trying to happen is kept more secured. So now let's try to understand why do we need this digital certificate. So suppose let's talk about the passports which we use regularly. So why do we need a passport? For example, suppose if I am having the passport, Indian passport, it means that Anybody looking at the passport will identify me as a citizen of Republic of India. So this passport is a certificate to me which certifies that I am a legal resident of India. So very similarly, when two parties are trying to communicate with each other, suppose Alice sends a message to Bob, that message, that the whatever message the Bob is getting from Alice, Bob should have some means of confirmation that this message is actually sent by Alice itself. Okay, so nobody in the middle of the communication should be able to hack that particular message. Even if a person hacks that particular image, once Bob gets that modified message, Bob should be able to identify that this message is changed or modified. So this digital certificate is another payload what is included in communication. So apart from the message being encrypted, there is a digital certificate associated with that particular encrypted message which is sent to the receiving end. This digital certificate gives us information about the identity of an entity. So here entity, the term entity is used in the prescribed textbooks because the entity can be a single person, or it can be a system, or it may be a software program also. We're trying to communicate. So as we have different libraries, APIs to communicate between two different computers which are in two different continents. Need not every time a human has to send a message to another human. So here entity covers all the communicating entities. For example, humans, computers, and also maybe the software programs. So now who issues this digital certificate? So we are talking about Alice encrypting his message and also sending a digital certificate with the message. So when we say digital certificate, who ensures that there is a digital certificate? There is a legitimate, valid digital certificate. So these certificates are issued by certification authority, which may be government or private agencies based upon different countries. Digital certificates are not only issued to people, but they can be issued to computers, softwares, and other application packages. So once the computer is identified by its MAC ID, or software is identified by its port, the humans can be identified with so many different information we regularly exchange. These digital certificates can be associated with a person or with a computer or with a software. Now, any kind of communication which happens, whether it's over telephone or if I'm sending a mail, or if I am uploading a video to any particular YouTube or any other person, every communication needs to be governed. So a protocol sets the rules for governance. Very similarly, the way protocols are designed to govern a communication, even digital certificates are also based upon some governance. So the International Telecommunication Union, ITU, defines a standard by the term X.509, which clearly states what exactly is a digital certificate. If a person is sending a digital certificate along with the message, then what should be contained in the digital certificate? So this protocol is defined by the term X.509. Public key pertaining to the user client is stored in digital certificates by the certification authority. So as we know, in the asymmetric communication where public key is used for encryption and private key is used for decryption, unlike this kind of a communication, to generate digital certificates, the concept includes encrypting the message using the private key. I want you to concentrate here. Encrypting the message using the private key of the sender. That encrypted message is also appended or is also sent with the actual encrypted message, and then the Bob receives these two entities. The first entity is the message, the actual message needs to be sent, that encrypted message, and this digital certificate. What exactly is digital certificate? Digital certificate is something which includes encryption of the message with the sender's private key. Very similarly, the Bob, in order to verify whether this message is being sent from Alice itself, what he does is he gets the public key from the certifying authority and he tries to decode what's in the digital certificate. My dear friends, here the actual payload, the actual message needs to be sent is of course encrypted with the public key. Now this is simple, this may be a little confusing at this beginning stage. We will talk about it further. The certifying authority digitally signs this entire information and includes digital signature in the certificate. Anyone who needs the assurance about the public key and associated information of client, he carries out the signature validation process using certifying authority's public key. As I have told you, the verification can be done using the certifying authority's public key. So digital signatures are encrypted using the private key, but whereas the actual message needs to be sent is encrypted using the public key of the sender. So now let's look at a small scenario here. So here we have a client. Who wants digital certificate. So now why does he need a digital certificate? Because he wants to communicate with some person. So what is included in the communication? So now in the communication, in order to communication to happen, there must be a private key and a public key. Since the client keeps his pair of private key and also public key is known to everyone, so his private key is stored in his private key store. So using this information, client uses his public key and an identifier, and the certificate signing request is done to the certifying authority. This certifying authority follows the rules of X.509 protocol and then issues a digital signature to the digital certificate to the client. So this is the simple process of obtaining digital certificates. So now let's talk about certifying authority and how it is carried out. What exactly is that? The certifying authority issues certificate to a client and assists other users to verify the certificate. So this means that the certifying authority issues the certificate to the client, as we have seen in the earlier image. And also, suppose if Bob wants to know what exactly is this message actually sent by the Alice, then Bob can easily contact certifying authority and get the confirmation. The certifying authority takes responsibility for identifying correctly the identity of the client asking for a certificate to be issued. So once the digital certificate is received from certifying authority, there should not be any room for a doubt that whether the certifying authority itself is compromised. So the certifying authority has to be legitimate, and a doubt should not be raised on how exactly the certifying authority itself can be compromised. So the certifying authority can be government or private agencies which promises about holding the information about their clients very secret and secure. Certifying authority also ensures that the information contained within the certificate is correct and digitally signs it. So what do we mean by the information contained? See, this digital certificate itself is created using metadata from the client's different keys, client's name, even the certifying authority's name is also included within the certificate to make it a very prompt one. So in the upcoming slides we will see what are the different fields present in the digital certificate. Let's look at about key functions of certifying authority. The certifying authority is responsible for generating key pairs, where the certifying authority may generate a key pair independently or jointly with the client. So this depends upon the subscription. If the client wants to be included within the process of generating key pairs, that can also be done, or else the entire authority can be given to the certifying authority itself. So the CA shall take a decision on generating the key pairs. Issuing digital certificate. The certifying authority could be thought of as the public key infrastructure equivalent of a passport agency. So I have explained you, as I have explained earlier, this is similar to having a passport agency. Who issues passport here? The government of India issues passport. So very similarly, passport is also issued by this digital certificate is also issued by the certifying authority. The certifying authority issues a certificate after a client provides the credentials to confirm his identity. It's very similar to opening a bank account. So we go to a bank and we ask the manager to open a bank account. Then he asks who exactly are we. So he asks Aadhaar card, driving license, and so many other things. Then only he will try to understand that he is a resident of India, and then a bank account is created based upon our records or documents we submit. So similarly, the certifying authority issues a certificate only after client provides credentials to confirm his identity. Here credentials may mean user ID and password. The certifying authority then signs the certificate to prevent modification of the details contained in the certificate. Thus this certificate has to deal with the timestamp, the other data of the sender, and so on. Publishing certificates. So what is this? This is one of the key functions of certifying authority. Publishing certificates. The certifying authority needs to publish certificates so that users can find them. So once the communicating parties subscribe for this kind of service, the publishing certificate, the certifying authority has to publish certificate based upon some strong mathematical background. So it should not be able to, it should not be very easy for a hacker or a middleman to compromise this digital certificate concept itself. There are two ways of achieving this. One is to publish certificates in the equivalent of an electronic telephonic directory. The other is to send your certificate out to those people you think might need it by one means or other. So I'll repeat it again. One way is to publish certificates in the equivalent of an electronic telephone directory. So for example, as we have a telephone directory where we write in one column we have got the list of names, in another column we have got the list of phone numbers. Very similarly, we can have a centralized document where everything is stored. Every person's every digital certificate is stored, or keys are stored. Or else we can have individual information, a particular digital certificate sent to him privately. That is, to send your certificate to those people who think might need it by one means or another. Maybe one means or another, maybe you can send it by courier, or else you can send it them by mail, or else you can call over the phone and inform about the package, etc. Verifying the certificates. Once the communication has been established, if Alice sends the message with the digital certificate to the Bob, now Bob wants to verify whether this message is actually sent by the Alice itself. So after decoding the digital certificate, this digital certificate is verified with the certifying authority. That is the verification of certificates. The certifying authority makes it public key available in an environment to assist verification of his signature on client's digital certificate. Revocation of certificates. So at times the certifying authority revokes the certificate issued due to some reasons such as compromise of private key by user or loss of trust in the client. After revocation, the centralized authority maintains the list of all revoked certificate that is available to the environment. Even though this entire communication happens in the public channel, there may be instances where the entire communication can be compromised. Either or else the communicating parties by mistake, they may spill out the actual procedure being involved. So under these circumstances, and also when the central authority loses faith over the communicating parties, the central authority may feel like their resources are being misutilized. So under these situations, the certificates are revoked. Now there are different classes of certificates used by different groups of people. So this is not so very necessary, but we'll go through this one. The class 1, these certificates can be easily acquired by supplying an email address. The basic level of digital certificate. You send an email and you get the digital certificate. Class 2, these certificates require additional personal information to be supplied in addition to the email. If you may have been asked your SSN number or your Aadhaar ID or your driving license and so on, so this becomes the metadata of a person or a computer. These certificates can only be purchased after checks that have been made about the requester's identity. Very similar to what that kind of speed post we get at our home. Once we claim that this is my Aadhaar number, this is my residential address, someone will come to your address and verify that whether really it is you who is trying to communicate. So those kinds of digital certificates fall under the category of class 3. The class 4 digital certificates may be used by governments and financial organizations needing very high levels of trust. So there may be multi-layered security involved in class 4 digital certificates for the confidential communication between governments and financial organizations whose data leak may lead to catastrophes. So now let's look at a simple digital certificate format, what we have been referring at X.509. This certificate contains a serial number and version. So as the students are identified by different university seat numbers and so on, the roll numbers, very similarly, the digital certificates are also issued some serial numbers, and if they are revoked, how many times has it been revoked, and all those things will be taken care by version. Issuer information. The distinguished name of an entity includes his or her common name, email address, and organization country. So the digital certificate is going to have the basic information of the sender, that is issuer information. Certificate signature and associated signing algorithm information. So what is the algorithm followed to decide this particular digital certificate? It is necessary to verify the authenticity of the certificate. For this purpose, it is signed by the issuer itself. So the certificate should include the issuer's digital signature and also the algorithm used for signing the certificate. Digital signature itself is a different concept and it's beyond the scope of our discussion. But the one of the data included in the digital certificate is the certificate signature and also the signing algorithm being followed by the timestamp, that is validity period. So these are the two date fields that specify the start date and end date between which the certificate is valid. So we have already seen in this session that as and when we change our keys, even the digital certificates also needs a change to avoid the compromising of the communication. Subject information. This includes the distinguished name of the certificate's subject or owner. So for example, if the communication is happening based upon some educational motives, then the subject information may clearly specify the purpose of the communication which is being attempted. So this is the basic format of any digital certificate. So this is a simple diagram which explains how X.509 certificate structure looks like. It starts with the version and it has got the serial number as we have seen, and the algorithm being followed, issuer name, the timestamp, the subject name, the algorithm being followed, and so on. So this is one of the very important topic for the examination. So my dear friends, so far we have seen the digital certificates. Now let's move on to a very different concept, that is public key infrastructure. So what is this public key infrastructure? Public key infrastructure includes everything, including the certifying authority and key management, and everything which falls under the communication, even the encryption process also. Functions of public key infrastructure are as follows. A public key infrastructure includes the certifying authorities, the physical infrastructure, and the formulation and enforcement of policies and procedure. It includes the following services. For example, certificate creation, certificate issuance, storage, archival. Archival is all about storing for a long time. Key generation and key escrow, so how far it is to be kept and deleted, certificate key updation, certificate revocation, and all these things comes under public key infrastructure. So this is just the broader heading of a certifying authority. So the whatever certifying authority does, that comes under the public key infrastructure. So there are crucial differences in the support required for private keys used for decryption versus those used for signing. So when we sign a document, it means that on the this is the document which we are trying to send, but that can be easily compromised if the message is intercepted by the hacker. So that's why we have got the digital certificate. Digital certificate is going to clearly establish the strong communication, and it has got no space for imposters. In the case of encryption and decryption, it is often necessary to have a backup of the decryption key, that is the private key what we use for decryption, that has to be kept secret. If not, an employee who loses his decryption key will be able to decrypt the archives of sensitive data he may have accumulated. So if that's not kept safe, then any employee or any software can lose his or her important data. So public key infrastructure within an organization, for example, might hold private keys in escrow, that is, may be securely backed up and made available to the owner or to a trusted authority. Okay. On the other hand, there is no need to back up a private key used for digital signing. So if such a key is lost, the owner could inform the certifying authority, so therefore the certificate is revoked. Then followed by that, in those situations, he or she could obtain a new signing key and receive a new certificate carrying the corresponding public key. So as we know, this certificate includes so much of data. Once it is compromised, once again we need to render all the information including the public key. An important function of the public key infrastructure is to provide a safe archival facility for all issued certificates. So even with the digital certificates, the certifying authorities need to be very strong, whether they are storing it physically somewhere or they are trying to maintain an electronic copy of that. The facility should be very strong and it should be free from any middleman attack. So now let's look at the different ways of doing this public key infrastructure with single certifying authority. So as we can see, in this diagram, there is one certifying authority and we have got so many users. The certifying authority could issue certificates to multiple users, U1, U2, U3, enabling any pair of these users to communicate securely using certificates exchanged between them. Suppose we have got 10 users, U1 to U10, then the certificates are shared among these people for communication. So this is shown in this figure. So each arc in the figure is a trust relationship. So once we have got this directed arrow, it notifies the relationship between the two entities. For example, the arc from the CA1 to U2 expresses the fact that the certifying authority vouches for U2's public key in the certificate issued by the certificate 1 to U2. Such an architecture, however, is not scalable. Once the digital certificates are shared among 10 users, one addition into this system may need the sharing of information to be duplicated. So this is one thing which should be upgraded, and of course it is in the upcoming different techniques. So here is the hierarchical tree based public key infrastructure architecture. So in this, a practical solution to the problem is scalability, is to have a certifying authority certify other certifying authorities, who in turn certify other certifying authorities, and so on. So here we establish an inheritance kind of a picture where we have got the relationship between, or the linkages between, the different certifying authorities. Instead of sending the information to individual users, if those individual users are included under one certifying authority, then instead of sending it to individual users, it can be sent to certifying authorities. So that's what is being shown in this particular diagram. So here certifying authority 1 issues certificates to certify CA2, CA3 and CA4. CA2 in turn issues certificates to CA5 and so on. So it is put under CA5 is put under CA2. CA5 authority 5 issues certificates to user 2 and user 3. So that's how it's been categorized. The advantage of this approach is very easy scalability. Each certifying authority is responsible for certifying a limited number of users or other CAs. So instead of sending it to one single user, it is sent to certifying authority. Mesh-based public key infrastructure. A more dense web of trust is shown and is referred to as a mesh-based public key infrastructure. This could include mutually trusting certifying authorities. CA1 trusts CA2, CA1 trusts CA2, and is shown by a bidirectional arc. Yes, we can notice that here that CA1 and CA2 are having the mutual trustable relationship with this bidirectional arc. In this tree-based public key infrastructure, there may be multiple trust paths between two users. Yes, there can be multiple trust paths between two users if the situation demands. Example, there could be multiple trust paths between user 1 and user 7. So user 1 is under CA1, user 7 is under CA4. Then the path CA1, CA3, CA4, CA1, CA3, CA4. So it's just like moving through the graphs. So if U1 wants to have a relationship with U7, then the path is from U1 to CA1 to CA3 to CA4, and then we reach the U7 and so on. So it can also happen through CA1, CA2 and CA4. So this is a mesh base where we get the closed loops. In the bridge based public key infrastructure, it is motivated by the need for secure communication between organizations in a business or partnership. So is here instead of using users, when a large number of users sitting in a building or in an organization needs to have a secure communication, then bridge-based public infrastructure is suitable. Suppose that the partnering organization already have their own PKIs. A bridge CA is introduced that establishes a trust relationship between a representative authority from each organization. So this also calls for dynamic way of establishing the communication using the bridge-based PKI. This is accomplished by the bridge CA and the organizational representatives issuing certificates to each other. The representative CA is one that has a trust path to all of the users in that particular organization. So bridge, mesh, and we have seen so many different ways of making this public key infrastructure possible. So my dear friends, in this video, in this class, we have learned something about what exactly is key management. So once we say key management, what are all the things included in the key management: key exchange, storage, use, and we saw what are the different challenges in key management, what exactly is a digital certificate, what is the basic structure of a certificate using the X.509, and we saw public key infrastructure. It usually includes everything within the encryption. It includes the keys, it includes the certifying authorities, it includes the physical infrastructure, and then we saw the little detailed theory regarding the public key infrastructure, different kinds of public key infrastructure, and also we have seen the different functions of key infrastructure also. So I will stop this session here now. In the next class, we will start with the more complex concepts included within this particular module 3. Thank you.